Hi, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. Glad to be back with you this evening. We're going to continue reading in our book, The Long Winter by Laura Ingalls Wilder. In chapter 20, which is titled The Hard Winter. The sun shone again the next morning and the winds were still. The day seemed warmer than it really was because the sunshine was so bright. "This is a beautiful day," Ma said at breakfast, but Pa shook his head. "Sun's too bright," he said. "I'll get a load of hay as soon as I can, for we'll need plenty on hand if another storm comes." He hurried away. Anxiously, from time to time, Ma or Laura or Carrie peeped through the frosty window to see the northwestern sky. The sun was still shining when Pa came safely back, and after a day's second meal of brown bread and potatoes, he went across the street to hear the news. In a little while, he came gaily whistling through the front door and burst into the kitchen singing out, "Guess what I got?" Grace and Carrie ran to feel the package. It feels like, Carrie said, but she did not quite dare to say what it felt like for fear that she might be mistaken. "It's beef," Pa said. 4 pounds of beef to go with our bread and potatoes. He handed the package to Ma. "Charles, however did you get beef?" Ma asked, as she could not believe it. "Foster butchered one of his oxen," Pa answered. "I got there just in time. Every last bit to bones and gristle sold 25 cents a pound. But I got 4 pounds of it. Here it is. Now we'll eat like kings." Ma quickly took the paper off the meat. "I'll sear it all over well and pot roast it," she said. Looking at it made Laura's mouth water. She swallowed and asked, "Can you make gravy, Ma, with water and brown flour?" "Indeed I can," Ma smiled. "We can make this last a week, for flavoring at least. And by that time the train surely will come, won't it?" She looked smilingly at Pa, then she stopped smiling and quietly asked, "What is it, Charles?" "Well," Pa said reluctantly, "I hate to tell you this. The train isn't coming." They all stood looking at him, stunned. He went on, "The railroad has stopped running trains till springtime." Ma threw up her hands and dropped onto a chair. "How can it, Charles? It can't do that. Till the spring? This is only the 1st of January. "They can't get the trains through," said Pa. "No sooner do they get a train through a cut than a blizzard comes and snows it all in again. They've got 2 trains here and Tracy, snowed under between the cuts. Every time they cleared a cut, they threw up the snow on both sides. And now all the cuts are packed clear full of snow to the top of the very snowbanks. And at Tracy, the superintendent ran out of patience." "Patience? Patience?" Ma exclaimed. What's his patience got to do with it? He knows that we are out of supplies here. How can he think we're going to live till spring?" "It isn't his business to be patient. It's his business to run trains." "Now, Caroline," Pa said. He put his hand on her shoulder, and she stopped rocking and rolling her hands in her apron. "We haven't had a train for more than a month, and we're still getting along all right," he told her. "Yes," Ma said. "There's only this month, and February's a short month. March will be spring," Pa encouraged her. Laura looked at the 4 pounds of beef. She thought of the few potatoes left, and she saw the partly filled sack of wheat standing in the corner. "Is there any more wheat, Pa?" she asked in a low voice. "I don't know, Laura," Pa said strangely. "But don't worry. I bought a full bushel, and it's by no means gone. Laura could not help asking, Pa, you couldn't shoot a rabbit? Pa sat down before the open oven and settled Grace on his knee. Come here, Half Pint, he said. You too, Carrie, I'm going to tell you a story. He did not answer Laura's question. She knew what the answer was. There was not a rabbit left in all that country. They must have gone south when the birds went. Pa never took his gun with him when he went hauling hay, and he would have taken it if he'd ever seen so much as a rabbit's track. He put his arm around her as she stood close against Carrie at his knee. Grace cuddled in his other arm and laughed when his brown beard tickled her face as it used to tickle Laura's when she was little. They were all cozy in Pa's arms, and the warmth from the oven coming out was pleasant. Now listen, Grace, Carrie, and Laura, said Pa, and you too, Mary and Ma. This is a funny story. And he told them the story of the superintendent. The superintendent was an Eastern man. He sat in his office in the East and ordered the train dispatchers to keep the train running. But the engineers responded that the storms and the snow had stopped the trains. Snowstorms won't stop us from running the trains in the East, he said. Keep the tracks running in the western end of the division. That's an order. But in the West, the trains kept stopping. He had reports that the cuts were full of snow. Clear the cuts, he ordered. Put extra men. Keep the trains running. Hang the costs. They put on extra men. The costs were enormous, but still the trains did not run. Then the superintendent said, I'll go out there and clear those tracks myself. What those men need now is someone to show them how to do things, how we do it back east. So he came to the Tracy, and in his special car, and he got off there in his city clothes, and his gloves and his fur-lined coat, and this is what he said. I've come to take charge of this myself. I'll show you how to keep these trains running. In spite of that, he was not a bad fellow when you knew him. He rode out in the work train to the big cut west of Tracy. He had piled out in the snow with the work crew and gave his orders like any good foreman. He moved that snow up out of the cuts double quick. And in a couple days, the tracks were clear. That shows you how to do it, he says. Now run the train through in the morrow and keep it running. But that night a blizzard hit. His special train couldn't run in the blizzard. And when it stopped blowing, the cut was packed full of snow to the top of the snowbanks that he'd thrown up on both sides. He got right out there with the men again, and again they cleared that cut. It took longer this time because they had more snow to move. But he got the train through, just in time to be snowed in by the next blizzard. You had to admit that superintendent had stick-to-itiveness. He tackled the cut again and got cleared again, and then he sat in the Tracy through another blizzard. This time he ordered out 2 fresh work crews and 2 locomotives with a snowplow. He rode out to the Tracy cut in the first locomotive. The cut rose up like a hill now. Between the snowbanks that he had thrown up on both sides of them, the blizzard had packed earth, it's dirt, and snow, frozen solid 100 feet deep, tapering off for a 1/4 mile. All right, boys, he said, we'll clear her out with picks and shovels till we can run the snow plows through. He kept at 'em, double quick and double pay, for 2 days. There was still about 12 feet of snow in the tracks, but he had learned something. He knew that he was lucky to get 3 clear days between blizzards. So on the 3rd morning, he was going to run the snowplows through. He gave his orders to the 2 locomotive engineers. They coupled, that means joined them, the locomotives together with the snowplow in front and ran the work train out into the cut. The two work crews piled out, and in a couple of hours, the fast work, they had moved another couple feet of snow. Then the superintendent stopped the work. Now, he ordered the engineers, you boys back down the track a full 2 miles and come ahead from there with all the steam pressure you've got. With 2 miles to get up the speed, you ought to hit this cut at 40 miles an hour and go through her clean as a whistle. The engineers climbed into their locomotives. Then the man on the front engine got down again. The men of the work crew were standing around in the snow, stamping their feet and beating their hands to keep warm. They crowded in to hear what the engineer was going to say because he walked up to the superintendent and said it just the same. I quit. I've been driving a locomotive for 15 years and no man can call me a coward. But I'm not taking any orders to commit suicide. That's something that would kill him. You want to send a locomotive up against 10 foot of frozen snow at 40 miles an hour, Mr. Superintendent? You can get some other man to drive. I quit right here and right now. Pa paused, and Carrie said, I don't blame him. I do, said Laura. He oughtn't to have quit. He ought to have figured out some other way to get through if he thinks that way won't work. I think he was scared. Even if he was scared, Mary said, he ought to do as he was told. Superintendent must know best what to do and how to do it in order to be the superintendent. He doesn't know best, Laura contradicted, or he had kept the train running. Go on, Pa. Go on, Grace begged. Please, Grace, Ma said. Please, said Grace. Go on, Pa. What happened next? Yes, Pa. What did the superintendent do then? Mary asked. He fired him, said Laura. Didn't he, Pa? Pa went on. The superintendent looked at the engineer, and he looked at the men standing around listening, and he said, I've driven a locomotive in my time, and I don't order any man to do anything I wouldn't do myself. I'll take the throttle. I'll drive it. He climbed up into the locomotive and set her in reverse, and the two locomotives backed off way down the tracks. Superintendent kept them backing up for a good 2 long miles, till they looked smaller than your thumb looks far down the track. Then he signaled with the whistle to the engineer behind, and they both put on the steam. That'd be like a stepping on the gas. Those locomotives came charging down that 2 miles of straight track with wide open throttles, full speed ahead and coming faster every second. Black plumes of coal smoke rolled away far behind them, headlights glaring brighter than the sunshine, wheels blurring faster and faster, roaring up to 50 miles an hour. They hit that frozen snow. What happened then, Pa? Carrie asked breathlessly. Then they rose up a fountain of flying snow that fell in big chunks for 40 yards around. For a minute or two, no one saw anything clear. Nobody knew what had happened. But when the men came running to find out, there was the second locomotive buried halfway into the snow and the engineer crawling out of the rear end of it. He was considerably shaken up, but not hurt badly enough to mention. Where's the superintendent? What happened to him? They asked the engineer. All he said was, how the dickens do I know? All I know is I'm not killed. I wouldn't do that again, he said. not for $1,000,000 in gold. The foremen were shouting to the men to come on with their picks and their shovels. They dug the snow loose from around the second engine and shoveled it away. The engineer backed out and down the track out of the way while the men dug furiously into the snow ahead. To come at the first engine and the superintendent. In hardly any time at all, they'd struck solid ice. That first locomotive had run full speed head on into the snow its full length. It was hot with speed and with steam. It melted the snow all around it, and the snow water froze solid in the frozen snow. There sat the superintendent, madder than a hornet, inside the locomotive's frozen cake of ice. And this is what it looked like. Grace and Carrie and Laura laughed out loud. Even Ma smiled. The poor man, Mary said. I don't think it's so funny. I do, said Laura. I guess he doesn't think he knows so much now. Pride does go before a fall, said Ma. Go on, Pa, please, Carrie begged. Did they dig him out? Yes, they dug him out and cracked the ice and broke a hole through it to the engine, and they hauled him out. He was not hurt, and neither was the locomotive. The snowplow had taken the brunt. The superintendent climbed out of the cut and walked back to the second engineer and said, Can you back her out? The engineer said he thought so. All right, do it, the superintendent said. He stood watching till they got the engine out. Then he said to the men, Pile in. We're going back to Tracy. Work shut down until spring. You see, girls, said Pa, the trouble is he didn't have enough patience. Nor perseverance, said Ma. Nor perseverance, Pa agreed. Just because he couldn't get through with shovels or snowplows, he figured he couldn't get through at all, and he quit trying. Well, he's an Easterner. It takes patience and perseverance to contend with things out here in the West. When did he quit? Laura asked. This morning. The news was on the electric telegraph, and the operator at Tracy told Woolworth how it happened, Pa said. And now I must hustle to do the chores before it gets too dark. His arm tightened and gave Laura a little hugging shake before he set Carrie and Grace down from his knees. Laura knew what he meant. She was old enough now to stand by him and Ma in hard times. She must not worry. She must be cheerful and help them all keep up their spirits. So when Ma began to sing softly to Grace when she undressed her for bed, Laura joined in the song. Oh, canna, bright canna, I'm bound for the... Sing, Carrie, Laura said hurriedly, so Carrie began to sing. Then Mary's sweet soprano came in. On Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wistful eye on Canaan's bright and shining strand, where my possessions lie. O Cana, I'm bound for the happy land. The sun was setting, so red it colored the frosted window panes. It gave faintly rosy light to the kitchen, where they all sat undressing and singing by the warm stove. But Laura thought there was a change in the sound of the wind, a wild and frightening note. After Ma had seen them all tucked in bed and had gone downstairs, she heard and felt the blizzard strike the house. Huddled close together and shivering under the covers, they listened to it. Laura thought of the lost and lonely houses, each one alone and blind, with cowering in the fury of the storm. There were houses in towns, but not even a light from one of them could reach the other. And the town was all alone in the frozen, endless prairie, where snow drifted and winds howled, and the whirling blizzard put out the stars and the sun. Couldn't see them anymore. Laura tried to think of the good brown smell and the taste of the beef for dinner tomorrow. But she could not forget that now the houses in the town would be all alone till spring. There was half a bushel of wheat that they could grind to make flour, and there were a few potatoes, but nothing more to eat until the train came. The wheat and the potatoes, they were not enough. That's where we're going to stop for now. Well, I'm sure that was very disappointing. It would be to me, and kind of scary. But we'll see what happens and how they manage to get through. Well, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I want to pray blessings on you and yours, in your house and out of your house, in the day and in the night. Whatever you do, keep dreaming. Good night and God bless you.